this is Ryan Leach. I'm here with David Bowick, and we're here to talk about his use of Reverb.
Hey guys, how's it going?
So you mostly use Pro Tools. Do you ever use the built-in Reverb plugins that come with that?
Every once in a while. You know, they have a lot of great things that they do, the software being a huge one of them, but you know, a lot of times people who make specifically plugins can do it a little bit better and give you a little bit more options.
You ever use Waves or?
I do. I love the Waves Reverb. There's a lot of really cool stuff in there that you can do. You know, they have all the basic things you need, different rooms, plates, all sorts of stuff. And they come built in with a lot of cool presets too, which can be a really helpful place to start. They also have one of my favorites is they have a reverse reverb, which is really cool. I've used that quite a bit.
So you produce a lot of different styles. You do rock, hip hop, electronica, folk. What else? I don't know.
A little bit of swing.
A little swing. So they all sound very different. I would assume you have to use reverb a little differently for each of them. How would you maybe approach the vocals differently from hip hop to swing or something?
Sure. Well, the whole point of reverb is to put somebody in a space, right? These days, especially that when people aren't recording as much in huge studios where they have just rooms that sound amazing, what most people are trying to do is record everything in a really tight space that doesn't sound bad and have as little room as possible. So what reverb does is allow you to go in and artificially create that space. So, you know, a lot of people in hip hop, for example, really love the dry, almost no reverb sound, and that is it just has everything right here, or right here, I suppose. And the more reverb you add, it pushes things back a little bit further. And so, you know, like for instance, a rock singer should have a little bit amount of room on him because we're not used to hearing a rock singer that close to our face.
So really you're trying to create a sense of distance between the artist and the listener.
That's exactly right, yeah. You know, we're not used to hearing sounds that are that close, you know.
Okay.
You know, we don't, for those who've heard an anechoic chamber before, I mean, that is the most...
Haven't we all?
Haven't we all? That's the oddest sound you will ever hear anything be made because there are no reflections, there's zero reverb on anything. And
I've heard it's scary.
Yeah. Violins are suddenly the worst instrument you've ever heard. So, yeah, you're creating a space, and for rock singers, it's good to have a little bit of something on there. You can do all sorts of things, but it's really all about what the song is asking you to do, or what the singer is asking you to do through his performance.
So when you load up a new session, you're starting a new song, do you have a default, ready-to-go reverb setting, or do you kind of start from scratch and tweak it? Do you pick from a list of presets? How do you go?
If I'm not sure where I want to go with it, I'll start browsing through presets sometimes, just to get a feel of what kind of room I want somebody to be in. If I have a particular sound that I want, you know, if I know I want a plate, I will generally go to the Reverb, which I like their plates.
How would you know you want a plate?
That is a great question. Plates just have a very specific sound because there's not much pre-delay. Pre-delay is the amount of time that happens from the source sound, to hearing the reverb. So, you know, if there's a hit, and then if the reverb kind of happens after that, then that's called pre-delay. And plates don't really have that, so it's kind of like the quintessential plate sound is if you hit a tambourine. Most tambourines on a big hit, it's going to be like a shimmery. That's probably a plate because there's no pre-delay. Whereas if it was a huge cathedral sound, it would be like a because it takes a lot more time for it to echo and go around. But a plate,
you ever use reverb for special effects?
Oh, I love reverb for special effects. One of my favorites is doing a reverse delay, which our Reverb has a built-in effect under their, I think it's under their non-linear reverb. And it's just great for that kind of creepy swell in before the vocal happens. It works really well for darker tunes a lot of times. Rock songs, it works really well. Dark electronic. It just adds that element of like that they're somehow speaking before they're speaking, and
So what's a style or an instrument or something that you would naturally want to make really wet?
let's see. I love doing really lush background vocals. So in really any genre, I like to make background vocals pretty wet. To let the lead vocals stay up front pretty far, and then the background vocals can be just behind it, or sometimes way behind it.
Well, I think it's interesting to use the word lush, because that's like, because you're taking the setting to the purpose.
Oh,
You
that's
know,
nice. Yeah.
like you want it wet because you want it lush.
Exactly. A great example of the really wet sound is the Fleet Foxes.
Okay.
Where like, I just remember hearing that for the first time and thinking they're just drowning in reverb.
Right.
And at some point, somebody made that conscious decision to do that.
That's a stylistic
It's a
choice.
very stylistic choice, and I thought it was pretty bold. But you know, it gets that lush, huge sound.
Do you feel like reverb comes in and out of style? It's like the 80s, you think of like for snare drums,
Yeah, yeah.
and they go on forever, and then early 2000s is kind of drier. What's up with the cycle, and where is it going?
That's a great question. I think it's tough to say. I mean, I actually had a talk with another producer friend of mine about music in general and where it's been, where it was, and like talking about decades specifically and how some decades are defined by this or that. And reverb is one of those things where I feel like it's always changing and it's hard to decide. Like the 90s in general were very wet. Like that grunge rock sound is just very roomy drums. And the 80s were very wet, but in a very like gated, tight sense. You know, it was just. And nowadays it could be anything you want, which is I find interesting. People like Fleet Foxes are out there doing their thing, and people like Justin Timberlake are out there doing their thing, and they're both polar opposites as far as usage of reverb, but they're both interesting. So reverb, I think nowadays has become more of a stylistic choice
Rather than just keeping up with the fashion.
Right. So, you know, that's why it's fun to play around with this kind of stuff. Just see what feels good to you, try a whole bunch of stuff out, try plugins you've never used, try settings you've never used. That's something I like to mess around with a lot is if I'm not sure exactly where I want to go with it, I'll just start trying stuff and seeing what happens. And because oftentimes you come up with stuff you wouldn't have normally thought of, and it can be pretty neat.